now my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, David Shull, Principal and Industrial Practice Leader at Progressive AE. David has more than 30 years of experience as an architect, project manager, and program manager. He has worked with national local companies including Fabrical, System Motors, Carey Group, Shull, Smithfield Foods, and Morton Salt to develop custom solutions for their industrial environments. A pursued and experienced speaker, David hosts and presents at Progressive's AE Successful Pivot Point manufacturing event each year. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to David Shull.
Thank you. Good morning. You're going to have to do better than that. I'm going to depend on you because I don't do a lot of public speaking, so this has to feel more like conversation, okay? I've told 225 of you here, and I generally freeze up after about 25. So I'm pleased to talk about this. I am not a core expert on industrial revolutions, but I have a passion for it, so I hope you'll have some fun today. Just a quick, by way of introduction, I work at Progressive AE. Next week will be my 7-year anniversary there. It's been a very exciting time to work in our industry, and Progressive has given me chances to do things that other employers I've had in the past haven't even considered, let alone indulged. And this is one of them, the opportunity to explore and kind of look to the future a little bit, if it's possible to see. So we are a full-service architectural engineering firm with a broad slate of skills across the design and construction industry. That's all I'm going to say about that. I just want you to have that as a backdrop because I'm an architect by trade, and I try to organize other people's lives. That's really what an architect does. Some people think we just do plans. You know, they say old architects never die, they just keep changing their plans, okay? So Progressive is focused not just on architecture and engineering, but on helping make businesses better. So we're creating and designing solutions that drive performance. And part of the reason I got interested in the Industrial Revolution things are because I try to help them succeed both now and in the future in the industrial market. So if that helps you with some insight, you know, it's not that I have such great insight. We have such great resources these days that it's possible to, even if you know this much, if you stand on the shoulders of giants, you can see farther than the giant does. So with that, I want to ask a couple questions. How many of you are manufacturers? Okay, a few of you. How many of you are in finance? A few of you. Government? Okay. What are the rest of you? Retail? Couple. Well, what I'm going to do is walk you through very rapidly, so you're going to need to strap on seatbelts because we're going to go through a long history in a very short amount of time, and I'm going to try to show you that we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. How many of you believe it's the fourth one? You don't know? How many of you believe we're still in the first one? Okay. Well, here's the good news. Brookings Institute said in September of 2018, we surpassed 3.8 million people who were in or above the middle class. That's half the world's population. That's impressive enough. But the reality is, in 10 years, it will go from 3.8 to 5.3 billion people at or above the middle class. That's 1.5 billion people over 10 years who want what we make in the industrial world. So business will be good. That's the good news. The bad news is, if you think you knew what you're going to need to do, chances are you're going to have to rethink all of that because it may not anymore be true if it ever was. But let's first define an industrial revolution. Revolution is the forcible overthrow of a new were in favor of a new system, generally through a form of destruction and recreation. And industrial is coming from the factory or manufacturing. So in effect, the industrial revolutions we're going to talk about are the overthrow of the way people were thinking about things at a time in favor of a new and better way. So we're going to start with history. Sorry, for those of you who don't care about history, or maybe you think about the good old days, I think of what P.J. O'Rourke once said. Anybody who tells him about the good old days, he says, I just tell I give them one word: dentistry. It is better today than it used to be, right? We're going to find out more about that. 1698, why is that an important date? We'll see in a moment, but I'm going to first tell you what life was like then. It was an agricultural world, and it had been for most of organized man. The condition was you subsisted. You did enough to keep yourself alive. You lived on average about 35 years. Now I could say that it wasn't that you died at 35, or most of us in this room would already be dead, right? The fact is, the problem was child mortality was in excess of 45%. That means if you wanted to have 3 children, which was what most people need to know that a couple of them are going to take care of them in their old age, that you needed to have 6 to know you'd have 3. 45% would die before the age of 5. The threat was starvation. Yes, there was disease and infection and all of those things, but really there wasn't enough food to go around. In 1729, Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels, did an essay, a satirical essay, called A Modest Proposal, where he suggested that we take the children of the poor and feed them to the rich because they were the ones who were going to survive. Well, fortunately, naysayers like that don't make it very far. The Industrial Revolution comes along and sweeps them away like a broom. But in that age, you were only about twice as well off as a Roman citizen at the time of the Caesars. 2 times better off in 1,700 years. Let's enter the first Industrial Revolution. Machine age. We go from subsistence and the average lifespan of 35 years and a child mortality rate, and someone in 1765 comes up, named James Watt, with a minor improvement to the steam engine, and the factory floor is invented. That took how long? 67 years from the date the steam engine was invented to the point where it really took off. And now all of a sudden, we're using wood and coal to drive a factory floor. People are coming together and surviving. And the factory owner starts out as hero and ends up as villain because he saved the children from starving to death and then got blamed for child labor problems in the factory. Saved them from death and gave them life, and then gets blamed for having them work 15-hour days. So that is Industrial Revolution number 1. Number 2, I use 1872 because a series of things happened here. The robber barons came into power, and we go from survival, lifespan is starting to increase, child mortality rate is dropping, and now the key issue is pollution. We're not starving anymore, we're polluting everything because we're compiling in cities, factory floors, generating clouds of smoke and smog. Someone suggested that New York City by 1950, if we had stayed with the horse and buggy, would be 9 feet deep in horse manure. During this time frame in London, the Thames River was so full of waste that they actually took the curtains of Parliament and dipped them in things to have a perfume smell to try to stop the odor coming off the river. So pollution is now getting us. But what I want you to remember here is we go into the age of movement now. Oil and coal come into play. Electricity and steel take over. We invented the light bulb about 1872. We invented the telephone. The robber barons come into power. Oil and gas comes, and we start being a stable economy. We're able to distribute it now. And people move out of the cities. Except the cities keep growing. I think over the period of the Second Industrial Revolution, New York City went from 800,000 people 7.5 million people. The accelerant here is collaborative. People coming together, organized business, the Sloans of the world, the assembly line, all these things happened in the second industrial revolution. And the robber barons first create business and enable mass production and distribution of product, and then get blamed for piling up wealth. I think someone said J.D. Rockefeller gave more than 10% of his income to various people, but he was still vilified for having created a movement. Let's move to the third one now, where we now transform enterprise. Remember, the worry was monopolies in the second industrial revolution, the robber barons. Now the entrepreneurs kick in. So we go into business automated, digital systems and processes. By the time of this pivot point, 1947, when we invent solid state circuitry, the child mortality rate is down to 25%, and the average lifespan is up to 67 years. The threat now is overpopulation. We're expanding rapidly as a people because we're no longer dying as small children. And you had in 1972 a thing called limits to growth come out from the Club of Rome, where we're worried we're going to overpopulate the planet and go right back before the first industrial revolution to starvation. But the industrial revolution, I use this picture to help you think about how things have changed, kicks in, and the next thing we know, solid state circuitry has changed the world. Anybody know what this is? Who said light bulb? You're close. It's a vacuum tube. Solid state circuitry turned this into, have you seen chips these days that go in your cameras and things that are about the size of your thumbnail? What's in that chip is about 1 trillion of these. Some of them have as many as 1 trillion transistors. And we start to revolutionize. By the way, the energy source now is nuclear. We obtained nuclear after World War II, and we use it to generate power. And it's a cleaner form of power, yet continuing, believe it or not, the approach to clean energy. Now we're succeeding, and the hero turning into a villain is Silicon Valley, right? Now the robber barons have moved to the West Coast because the entrepreneurs have turned monstrously successful. I remember hearing how Steve Jobs actually had a warehouse of talents with something like $80 billion in cash sitting on it. It's all about creativity now, okay? So let's just do a quick review of these first through third industrial revolutions. It's machine age from survival to success, from 35-year lifespan to 78 years by the year 2000, and the child mortality rate's down to 6%. By the way, from 1700 to 2000, the average person is 13 times better off over 300 years. We've already revolutionized the world 3 times, and there's another revolution coming. I like to think about this way. I had a great aunt who was born in 1901, died in the 90s, and she told me as a child, she went on vacation from Indiana to Michigan by horse and buggy. And in her retirement years, she lived in Southern California and would return periodically to the farm by jet airplane. One lifespan. Significant difference. But we're really here to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. So do you believe there's 3 now? Everybody agree there's 3? What is the fourth then? Well, let's find out. Business is now changing form. It's going into accelerated motion. And it's the age of flow, and I'll show you how. First of all, the key innovation here is software. Heard of the works-cited people? Software driving us? It is, isn't it? The new energy source is wind and solar. The legacy is significant. Notice the threat is now unsustainability. Back in the previous revolution, when we were worried about overpopulation, now we're worried about sustainability. I think of P.J. O'Rourke again, who once said, overpopulation is really just saying, just enough of me way too much of you. Now we're worried about, I'm going to live a long time. What is the world I'm living in really going to be like? And we're able to live well enough to focus on making it a high quality of life, not just a survival or subsistence life. So the accelerant now in the age of flow is about circulation. I like what Thomas Friedman said. He referred to this age as going supernova. What is supernova? That's when a planet goes from a solid state circuitry, to exploding into a gaseous state. It's no longer about solid and what you have, it's about motion and movement, okay? So as you think about everything I've shared so far, I just want to share one thing with you, and that's this little video from the World Economic Forum as you reflect on what we've talked about so far. Klaus Schwab, chairman of the World Economic Forum, is credited with coining the term Fourth Industrial Revolution. The pivot point in this case is about the year 2007. Do you remember what was happening in 2007? What happened economically? Our economy crashed, didn't it? Money stopped moving for a period of time, and it scared everybody. But even though money stopped moving, other things were happening. Every one of these companies you see on the screen really launched something significant in 2007. It's hard to believe that was just 12 years ago. And now we don't have an individual pivot point change. We have a series of them starting to come together and make a radical difference. Let's take two of them that you probably haven't heard of. Anybody familiar with those two companies? Probably not. Some of you guys in software, right? One is about organizing utilities that we use for programs, right? And the other is open source. The ability of anyone to make something, publish it for others to use, and to pyramid that together. Those two things combine to create software-enabled networking. One of the oldest companies, Ma Bell, one of those monopolies that got broken up, reemerges here as a significant player in starting the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Why is that important? Do you remember this device here? Does anybody have one of those in the room today? You have one here? No. At home you have one. There's other museum things at your house too, aren't there? So that device is a BlackBerry. Steve Jobs came out with this device and everybody made fun of it. Where's the keyboard? Well, why is that important? Where is the keyboard on that? It's a piece of software. This is a phone from my wife's bedroom when she was a teenager. Do they look different at all? Some of you wondering what that circular thing on the face is, right? For my wife, this is social media. My granddaughter still recognizes this as a phone, by the way. She thinks this cord means it's charging. So here we are looking at two iterations within a short period of time. Everyone thought the BlackBerry, I can remember when everybody had BlackBerry. And all of a sudden this comes out and the world changes. And now we're dematerializing. If you're worried about natural resources being used up, we're in an age where natural resources are going to be reduced, not expanded. So that's a list of about 50 different devices that cell phone replaces by having that software-driven keyboard. And I'm sure you could name some that I didn't put on there. And so the challenge here now is they pair up with AT&T exclusively to provide you a new service, right? And it almost brought them to their knees. If you remember 2007 and the iPhone coming out, and all of a sudden people are complaining, this does great things, but it's slower than I could possibly stand. And it's because poor AT&T was experiencing monstrous growth in their structure systems that are being called on to serve that phone. Over 8 years, their networking capabilities had to grow 100,000%. There's no way that happens physically. It happened with software. So let's talk about now the key changes here. We're going to play. There's four shifts I'm going to show you. One is flow. We've already talked about that. 2 is convergence. 3 is acceleration. and 4 is circularity. So first of all, we're going solid state to fluid state, low friction flow. 2, we're now distributing, just like that planet exploded or that star exploded, we're spreading out. Convergence, we're coming back together where we're combining across boundaries to make new inventions. Then that's happening at an accelerating rate. And lastly, we're finally discovering the machine age is over, and it's your human body that is the model by which we should live. And then what we're going to have to put up with is a regular destruction of what we know in favor of a better future. Okay? So let's take the first one. Now's where we get to play a little game. What's the world's largest taxi company? You're right, Uber. World's largest lodging provider. What? Airbnb. World's most valuable retailer. People said Amazon. Did anybody say Alibaba? What about the world's most popular media owner? Facebook. Now let me show you. That taxi company doesn't own any cars. That lodging provider doesn't own any real estate. That retailer doesn't have any inventory. And they don't make any content. What they've found in this new revolution is ways to use your cars, your houses, your factories, and even your gossip to make money, right? So it has now shifted from how much gold or silver, how many cows do you have, how many horses, how many soldiers, to how much flow can you create. Convergence, second point. We see across these 3 areas, physical, biological, and digital, crossover inventions that are taking us over. The ones that scare me the most have to do with nanotechnology, but we'll talk about that another time. Some folks in the industrial world are very focused on Industry 4.0. You see what a small sliver of the 4th Industrial Revolution that really is. And then acceleration. You don't have to study this chart. I'm just going to show you one thing over here on this screen. You see that curve right there? Between 2005 and 2014, the flow of information has increased 45 times. You see finance has dropped, trade has leveled off, information is continuing to rise at exponential rate. A distributed society. Now what I'm going to do is show you a few things. Last 18 months, what do these companies have in common? They all went bankrupt. Sears has been circling the drain for years. They're the exception that proves the rule, but Toys R Us was up and gone in no time, right? Toys R Us was a major client of Progressive Street, about 15 years. You'd think that we'd be really concerned, but you know what happened when Toys R Us dissolved? Their force went other places, and where we had Toys R Us as a client, we now have 5 different clients. Because they all went somewhere, looked around at the circumstance, called my counterpart, Doug Worrell, and said, Doug, you gotta come help me, I need to sort this out. Destruction and recreation. Circularity is the sustainability movement. It's a cradle-to-cradle movement, going in big circles. It's the culture of reduce, reuse, recycle, refurbish, regenerate, be responsible, and restore. In the old days, we were fragile. We were going to starve. We've gone through being strong to resilient, self-healing. Now we're headed for anti-fragile. The ones that survive will be the ones that can be self-improving. So, what's going to happen to business? Customers are going to expect speedy response. They're going to expect customized and enhanced products that are enhanced by data. They are going to expect you to innovate. If you produce things, you're in the service business whether you like it or not. So the key is really still the human element. You can worry about being put out of a job, but I don't know a manufacturer isn't confused by the news because at night they hear that we're all going to be out of jobs and we're going to need a government paycheck just to keep us alive. And in the morning they go to work and they can't find anybody to hire. So what is the significance of the human element? Computers handle data well for us, and the product of data is information. Information is great, and the product of that is knowledge. Computers are working all of that very well. But where you get into these next two, where the product of knowledge is understanding, and the product of understanding is wisdom, computers don't do that yet. Frankly, computer robots are still trying to master the threshold. They aren't anywhere near understanding the thrill my 2-year-old grandson gets by slipping his hand over and getting his sister's ponytail again. They don't get any pleasure out of it. They are just mining big data. So, what about that human element? You're going to need to be connective. This is a great event for that. You're going to need to be creative. Find people you can put your idea with their idea and make a new idea. Decide to act on it, and then be ready to adapt at a moment's notice. As far as your organization, you're going to have to be solution focused. Even if you make things, you're now a service provider of solutions to your customers. You're going to have to collaborate. You're going to have to circulate. And then you're going to have to create solutions that are close to where the customer is. And I'll show you why in a moment. Let's look at some applications. Retail. That phone was a major innovation, wasn't it? Look at what happened to Apple. Sales per square foot. They completely transformed the industry of retail sales with their product by providing a solution. That's not much to that store to generate $6,000 a square foot per year. It's focused on the product, but it's really focused on the customer. Okay. QSR. What's QSR? Quick service restaurants. They stole from manufacturing years ago. This is circa 1974. Who remembers that commercial? Come on, admit it. For you youngsters out there, that isn't just a fuzzy picture. That's what TV looked like. Have you seen this movie? I think what happened here is just fascinating. I actually looked it up. This here is a 3P event, circa 1940. It's 3P is production, preparation, process, where you go out and you practice something till you get it right. They stole from manufacturing in 1940 and created the distributed production facility called McDonald's. So they pop up industry now where the customer is, and they produce where the customer is. And what they did, combined with Ray Kroc, who learned how to franchise it, they transformed the restaurant industry. Let's go back to retail for one more moment. All of these companies are right now experimenting with same-day delivery. You order it in the morning and it's on your porch when you get home. If you're not figuring out how to be more responsive to your customers, you could be in danger of the destruction part of the life cycle. The last thing I want to share with you is small works well at doing these things and being agile. I've worked with these people for 40 years. They have a tiny little headquarters in Sacramento, California, 30 people. They have 50 people in different countries worldwide helping them. And last year they put up 400 buildings in emerging economies, which is, by the way, where those 1.5 billion people are here to serve. When I started with them in 2007, that was a building structure that they were putting up. Heavy steel, welded, they had to have a crew and equipment to erect it. They said it's taking too long. So they went to cold rolled steel that they could fabricate in a plant in Dodge City, Minnesota, and why there, don't ask. Container it and ship it. And now they can screw it together on site in one day using volunteers. And it worked great except for one thing. What happens when you ship it from the United States and it sits in port and your volunteers show up and the container's still in port? Enter local fabrication. They went to work where they could with a lighter structure, a little heavier than they were, fabricated in a shop with their own construction. And now this is a fabrication facility in the outback of Kenya. They've worked in 67 countries. They've learned how to deliver close to the customer at low cost as rapidly as possible so they can ramp up production without having to ramp up employment. All right, so I have something here to wrap up, just to close. And I thought of giving you a leave behind, but all of you have a personal digital assistant, don't you? So if you want some notes with this, there's about 3 slides here you're welcome to take pictures of if you want. If you don't, I haven't wasted the paper on you. But here's a recap of what we've talked about. And the future here is you need to connect, we need to collaborate, we need to create, and we need to circulate. This is those 4 industrial revolutions compared to what I went through each individually with you. They're side by side here so you can see the trends. Whoops, I'll go back for you. I see a few folks wanting to take pictures of that. And then I didn't invent all of this. There are about 4 resources that I really drew a lot of inspiration and understanding from. So if you want to read on your own, this is a great place to start. And with that, I really appreciate your listening so attentively. Next time, try to talk more. It would help me a lot. But I thank you so much, and you know what? I wish you the best in the 4th Industrial Revolution. There's 1.5 billion people waiting for your help. Thank you.
We've got time for a couple of questions. Do you have any questions from the audience today?
Well, I'm sure I've covered it exhaustively. Or exhaustingly, depending.
I recently heard in a podcast. So I recently heard in a podcast that the potential for efficiency or productivity gains in this century will never duplicate what we had in the last century because of last century's distributed electricity, aircraft, and cars. So you got those 3 things in the last century. How do you look forward at the coming and how that's going to actually eclipse that and make that a false statement? Or is it a true statement?
I'm going to give you a personal opinion. I've learned through this study that there's always going to be a Chicken Little out there saying the past is better than the future. And what I've learned is industrial folks are some of the most innovative and creative people in the world. And while there's people carping about how everything's going to fail, they're already on to the next thing they're going to do. And I believe that this flow question, the movement of information, is going to dwarf anything that we've seen before. And we literally have no idea even now what it's going to transform into. I don't see. Who was I talking to? Talked about a company that just came to the U.S. When was it, Tony? October. And they're already doing millions of dollars of business in the U.S. The ramp up of business today is so rapid and so exponential that and as we see innovation compare with innovation, we are going to platform like we've never seen in history. Any other questions?
Please join me in thanking David. Today with a few announcements. First, I would like to recognize some of our local entrepreneurs that are with us today. The Chamber has partnered with Surge, which is the entrepreneurial support network through Lakeshore Advantage. And you see these folks today with their special t-shirts on to let you know that they are here today investing in our local ecosystem and investing in our businesses of the future. So I would like to ask the folks with Surge who are with us today to stand and be recognized. Great work you're doing, and we all are really looking forward to seeing what's ahead. And then also, I have a very special announcement today, a presentation we want to make. We love honoring our members, and last week, 2 of our member firms were recognized among Michigan's 50 best companies to watch in the state. The Small Business Celebration in Lansing last week. So I would like to recognize and ask join me on the stage. First, Scott Geerlings, the Midwest Construction Group. Also Fred Doboritsky of Rutherford and Associates. So a great recognition for both these wonderful We're so very proud of the wonderful work you're doing and the way you represented our community. We're nearing the end of our program season for Wake Up West Coast. We've got one more, so we want to invite you back on June 11. That presentation is going to be with Pete Haynes, speaking about a panel discussion of how we prepare our workforce for the future. So I know it's going to be a great event. Have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you in a month.